25 million, 40 million, 75 million, and then 100 million. Is that the fire alarm?
Yeah.
Just get back with me. We'll make it happen.
This business constantly changes. The Mastering the Mortgage Business podcast is really just people who know what they're doing and have done it really well. My guest today is Heath Albritton with Guaranteed Rate. He has been in the mortgage industry for 26 years. Before the show, we're talking a little bit about, what kind of helps get you to being a top producer level. And we talked a lot about ethics. And I was thinking, do we mean work ethic? Do we mean honesty, integrity ethics? And so, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and good point. So first of all, thanks for having me on today. And I'm excited to dive in and learn more and see what you have to say. And hopefully we can convey some information that the audience can take with them. So when I think of ethics, I mean, certainly work ethic comes to mind, right? But also ethics in general and just doing the right thing. But, you mentioned I've been doing this 26, going on my 27th year now. And I think things are probably tougher now than what they were when I first got in the business almost. But one thing's for sure, you can never let down your guard. You can never let up. You're always having to find ways to reinvent yourself and to kind of roll with the times.
It's funny that you say that. There's a number of things that I did 10 years ago that I do differently now. But then there's some things where I'm like, back to like, how did I cut my teeth and putting boots on the ground in my community and things like that. So what are some ways that you started in the business and activities you used to do? And what are you doing now?
So some things that I do the same as I used to do is just trying to be everywhere that I can, be in front of as many people as I can. My referral partners, clientele, past clients. Well, the old saying is true. If you're out of mind or out of sight, you're out of mind. So you've got to be in front of these people all the time. You've got to be present. So those are the things, that's what I call blocking and tackling, right? Taking referral partners to lunch or to an event or going to dinner, whatever that may be. But some things that are different nowadays than they were 10 years ago is the digital platform. I mean, so many of my clients, and I would say the same for our competitors, you don't even meet them during the process. So I try to go as many closings as I can just so I can meet people. But everything's done over the web now, over the phone, through the computer. So it's such a digital thing. And we're doing videos, we're doing podcasts, right? We're doing all these things to disseminate the information because so many of our clients are moving here from other areas of the country. So you may not get that opportunity to meet them in person, right? It is a phone conversation, but using all the tools in the digital world today, those are things that I'm getting better at, but you've got to do more of it too. That's where your exposure comes from today.
When you're out there meeting with people and you're going to your closings, I think that's where the real, secret is, right? Like when you're meeting with those clients at the closing table and then their friend or family member comes to say, hey, who should I use for a mortgage? They're going to be like, oh, Heath, he's awesome. And probably not because they saw you on the video, when they first started or when they filled out their application on your website that it was so fun and easy, right? It's
Right.
those in-person moments at the end that create more of a lasting
And like you
impression.
said, with that personal touch, it's the last thing they remember. Right now, I'm lucky because not everybody gets to pass out Heath candy bars at their loan closing like I do. So
Shoot.
that's been a tool I've been using. I don't know, 15 or 20 years, and I'm not even the one that came up with that idea of all things. I feel terrible about that. But people don't forget my name, so it's just one thing that I can do. So I always have Heath candy bars with me. So, but yeah, that's so important. That's why I got back to that is because I felt somewhat out of touch, not meeting the people face to face. And it's easier to establish a lifelong relationship when you do go to that closing and shake hands and be able to congratulate them and see, hey, this is what it all boiled down to. This is why we do this. So I love going to, and in fact, I've got one this afternoon. I'm going to meet with the folks there that I haven't, they're moving down here from out of state. Haven't had a chance to meet them face to face. So I look forward to doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me about, I mean, you're obviously a hard worker and it's very clear being a top producer, like you said, if you want to get into this business and be successful in this business, like, yeah, you might have 1 or 2 days where you can golf, but don't think that that's going to be your, 24/7 lifestyle. And
Right.
you got to be out there hustling. So what does a day in the life of Heath Hustle look like?
Yeah, so a lot of that has to be, I've learned throughout the years is planning, right, and time management. You've got to be intentional about everything that you do. So you've got to spend time marketing because your competition is, right? You've always got to be telling yourself, I've got to add more referral partners. I've got to be different from the next guy. But also, you've got to become a guideline guru. You better know what you're talking about. I mean, we all have challenging loans. It's very rare that we get an easy loan these days. It's straightforward, right? So I'm always trying to better myself. I'm always reading. I'm taking classes. I'm doing all the above. But I'm always also trying to do an in-person lunch appointment once a day. I'm doing videos, sending out emails and just trying to make myself better, right? Marketing, social media, whatever that may be. I'm always busy. So right now, we're not as busy doing loans as we have been accustomed to in the past. So right now it's making myself better, right? Through learning or through education or marketing or something like that right now to build that business up. You always got to be building. And it seems like for the longest time, in my first 5 years in the business, I couldn't get over that hump, that $15 million hump. And then I was able to, and I got to 25 million, then 40 million, and then it was 75 million, and then 100 million, right? I was able to break that $100 million barrier for 3 or 4 years in a row, which is very, very hard to do. You've got to have a good team behind you. You've got to have good support. The things that we do each and every day to get better.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of, interesting how.
Is that the fire alarm?
Yeah.
Just get back with me. We'll make it happen. Okay.
All right, Heath. Well, welcome back to Mastering the Mortgage Business. That'll be a fun blooper down the road with the fire alarm situation we had there. But thanks for coming back on with us. And you were in the middle of telling a really interesting story about how you become a $100 million producer. Certainly nobody starts there. You kind of have that, 10 to 15 million mark that you were trying to break through. So let's start that over for our listeners and tell us about how you started and where you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we all would agree that you don't do this overnight, right? In anything you do, you're not going to be a success overnight. So the biggest thing I will tell you is that you have to invest in yourself. You have to. So even when times are slow, you've got to be spending money on yourself. And that's through education, through marketing, whatever you do, you've got to do it. So the more business you do, of course, the more you've got to spend to do that. So, I remember my first hurdle, it seemed like, was getting to $15 million in annual production. And when I got there, I was like, great, I hit that. But what's next? And, I think the next hurdle for me was 25 million. And at 25 million, that's where I think, in my opinion, that's where you plateau. And that's where you've got to bring in an assistant because there's just not enough hours in the day. When I first hired an assistant, it came out of my pocket solely. So again, that's making an investment in myself. So I did that, and then that allowed me to get to 40 million, 45 million, and then that was my next plateau. So I had to add another team member, right? I had to do more marketing. I had to learn more guidelines because I wanted to take it to the next level. And for me, that next level was 75 million. Once I got there, I said, okay, I've got there. So my next level is logically 100 million. And that's where I feel like, to me in this business, that's kind of the pinnacle when you can do $100 million. And, that is a good team of support around you. And that's an assistant, a processor, and a good underwriter, maybe a closer. But you've got to have that team on your side to be able to do those things and to do the volume. You may not want to be a $100 million producer, but that's just fine, right? If you want to be a $25 million producer, be the best $25 million producer you can be.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. I mean, as a loan officer who's trying to grow and become a top producer, where's that break point of where it's like, okay, I'm doing this much. Now, if I hire somebody, I'm going to be making less. So
Right.
How quick is that ramp up time that where the value of that person is replaced by the additional production that they're going to let me get to?
Yeah, and that's what you've got to ask yourself, right? But for me, and it seems like most of my peers that I talked to, $25 million was that threshold. Because I think we would all agree, too, that loans these days, it seems like we're having to work on them more to some degree. It depends on the complexity of your borrower. If you have a self-employed borrower, that's going to take a little more time. If you're dealing with tax returns and multiple businesses or multiple properties owned, those things take more time. So if you think about that, if you're working on a file like that for 2 or 3 days on end, well, you've lost 2 or 3 days of cultivating other relationships.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious about your assistant. So I know a lot of top producers in the business have an assistant. So somebody who's looking to get to that level, everybody I think has their assistant doing a little bit of something different depending on your personality type, your styles, what you like to have control over. I'm super A type. It was really hard for me to let things go with my assistant.
So, yeah, I think you mentioned, and you're right. Everybody that has an assistant has a different role, and I love going to set with top producers and seeing how they do things. And a lot of times you're going to find out that people do things a lot better than you do in some areas, and maybe you do things better than they do in some areas. And we're a very big company. We're based in Chicago, and I've had the luxury of going up there and spending time with 3 or 4 really top producers. And these guys, do 300, 400, $500 million a year, and our top guy does over $2 billion a year.
Wow.
And he has 55 people on his team. But going back to, for me, I like to talk to every single client, right? I direct every single client to my application, which is done online. I will in turn download the application and do the initial follow-up because people call to do business with me, right? Now,
That's right.
And from that point, once it becomes a deal, I'll introduce my team, and then my assistant will take over from there, and she'll introduce herself to everybody and what her role is. And from there, it's a handoff. And she's going to clean that file up for me, make sure it gets into processing and underwriting out and into closing. So in the past, I've had my assistant doing a clerical role, assistant role in marketing, and that just does not work. So I have a separate full-time marketing person as well. It was about a month ago, I guess, where we brought 12 top producers in our community together for a night. And I knew everybody. We all knew each other. We've been in the business a long time together. And we just sat in a room for 2 hours and just hashed through, the market that's going on right now. Where do we expect things to be 6 months, a year from now, right? And what's working, what's not working. And it was amazing what I walked away with. A $200 million producer, their time is in such demand. They don't have time for small talk. It's amazing. And not that they're impersonable, but every minute of their day is spoken for, right? But, there are things too that may work for me that don't work for somebody else, right? Or vice versa. Because I've tried things before. You try to be what somebody else does, and you know what? They're good at what they do. And I thought, well, that's what I need to be doing, right? And then I try that, and it doesn't work for me. So you got to find out what works for you and do it well.
Yes. And that actually brings me right back to the way that you and I started this conversation as to, how do you become successful? And the word that you said to me is ethics, right? And so I've talked to, a number of top producers. We'll continue to interview top producers like yourself who all have something special and y'all do something different. But I think the one thing that every single top producer is doing the same. I mean, you said it about that guy. He outworks everybody. So, depending on what your marketing strategy is, whether you have an assistant or don't, whether you go to closings or don't, it brings me back to what you said, right? Is just you got to work hard.
You do. And I think well too, this business, after 27 years of doing this, I don't think there's ever been a weekend where I didn't work, right? So if you've got to make yourself available, think about it. Our referral partners they're working typically when we're not. So you better be working when they are.
Any last tips for any of our listeners about, what's that special thing that they can do to take themselves to the next level?
Yeah. And I think in the market that we're in right now, it's getting out and educating people, right? Because people right now, we're in that unknown zone right now with where rates are all over the board, prices are all over the board, inventory's low. And what I'm doing is just getting out and educating as many people as I can right now about what's going on, what you can expect, and just, reassure them there's going to be a refinance opportunity down the road. We're not going to see 2s and 3s again, but if we can get back to high 4s, low 5s, and you can take advantage of that, great. So let's get into a house now. Let's do that. But you got to educate people. A lot of people don't know where the market is, right? They don't. They don't know where rates are as high as they are right now. But historically, they're low. right? But we know we get spoiled. We've seen the 2s and 3s for so long now. But good old-fashioned work ethic too. Get out there and pound the streets, right? Plant those seeds today. I need to get back out and do some home buyer seminars, right? And whether you're a first-time buyer or this is, your multiple time, doing home buyer seminars is a good way to educate. It helps me learn because you have to prepare to do it. So, it's a great idea.
I do appreciate you being on the show with us and sharing all of your wisdom with our listeners and our viewers. And just really hope that you keep slaying it out there.
Well, I'm going to try, and I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.